Good morning, everyone. My name is Dr. Eva Kleczek, and I'm the host of Voices of Impact with Dr. E. This is a platform for change makers, innovators, leaders, and those who have stories that want to share with us. We ask the tough questions, we discuss the tough topics, and we inspire those listening to us. Today, we have Bruce Wren with us. He's a coach, he's a trainer, he's an educator with more than 20 years of experience. He's also founder of ACE Independent Consulting Services and architect of a proprietary training system called Bruce System. He's also an author of an upcoming book, and we will dive in a little bit about his book as well. Today, I also have Kirti with me. He's my partner in crime. He's the owner of Well Conferences and the journal that I'm a chief editor of. We get to collaborate together. We decided to bring those two platforms together to give a greater recognition and visibility to those who join either of our platforms. And we wanted to make sure that we celebrate them, that we give them the opportunity to speak about the topics important to them and share their insights with wider audiences. Good morning, Bruce. Welcome.
Good morning. It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you for the invitation. I look forward to a great conversation.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Well, Bruce, maybe we dive in. You are an educator, you are a coach, you are a leader, and you are really an expert when it comes to leadership and creating a lasting impact. Would you mind telling us a little bit about your own journey, where you came from? How did your new adventure of organization came about? And we can dive into some specific leadership questions.
Sure. When I was growing up, I was very interested in leadership from a younger age. When I was in high school, I competed in speech and debate competitions and had a chance to go to a lot of great places and experience wonderful things and work with a lot of very talented people. Subsequent to that, in college, I worked with as a coach, a speech and debate coach, and went on to run my own program and had a national champion in one of the top programs in the Pacific Northwest and the Oregon, Washington area, and had a chance to host the nationals, do a lot of incredible things. So I did that while I was getting into my career path. So I was in operations in my career path in the entertainment industry, but I was also part-time in the coaching business. And I also did some athletic coaching as well. I really enjoyed that because I really felt like I got more out of the pupil's success than my own when I was coming up as a competitor. And I really, took a lot from that and was proud of the success. So subsequently in corporate world, I worked in operations for a number of years as a director and a regional director and positions like that. And then eventually I became an executive with Cineworld Regal Entertainment Group is what it's called now, which was the largest theater company in the world. Most of the time I worked with them. And I had met a lot of stars and did a lot of cool things with that as well, which I enjoyed. But on the learning and development side, I was the vice president and ran that function internationally for us. So as a result, I did that for 16 years. I really enjoyed the coaching aspects of that. And I worked with very talented people, with John Maxwell, the prolific leadership author, probably the most prolific in the States, and got to know John personally and invited to private events he was having, as well as Duke Fuqua, and getting experience there from a leadership perspective. At the time, it was ranked as the #1 leadership school in the world. It came after that, it's had a lot of success and blossomed a lot of people who came out of there to be successful. So I worked in operations for a number of years prior to that. So it was a good mix of operations and learning and development. And then subsequently, I've decided the last few years I wanted to do that full time because that's what I enjoyed. I equate, the whole coaching aspect a lot like parenting. And I'm a parent, and those who have kids know that it's so important that they get the support they need to succeed. Mm-hmm. And so it's very similar aspects to great leadership coaching. It is very applicable to our personal lives as well. And moreover, the last thing I would end with, and I know I'm giving a really extensive answer to a very short question, but because I do think that at this point in time right now, that we are in divided times, particularly in the States. And I think leadership is more important than ever, and I don't think it's rewarded as much as it should be. So I really thought over the last few years, somebody needs to talk about this. There's a million leadership books, but I tried to look at it from a more holistic perspective. What are all the things you need to do to be a successful leader in a time in which I think it's needed? And moreover, I really tried to substantiate it with the most current research as well as empirical examples to help illustrate to people why leadership is so important. And so that's really my perspective on it. It's something I'm passionate about. And the book eventually became a necessity for me as I really wanted to express these passionate opinions that I had about the state of leadership today. So hopefully that answers your question sufficiently.
Oh, absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you so much. What a wonderful, exciting career that you had. And meeting John Maxwell, definitely many of our viewers most likely know who he is. When my book launched, it landed right in between two of his books. So it was a wonderful thing to be able to have my leadership book next to his. Um, so Bruce, thinking about your leadership career now as you are an independent consultant, you have your own ACE consulting services. Can you talk a little bit about what are some of the methodologies or leadership practices that you are working with your clients with? What you are trying to install them or advise them on as they are either enduring through that trip or they are in the middle and something needs to change for them to advance even more?
Absolutely. We have a holistic approach to leadership. We can train in all the various areas, but we prefer to really talk about what I call the Bruce blueprint or the Bruce system, which is in its entirety what I think you need to do to be a successful leader. And we work with individuals one-on-one. We work in group facilitations with organizations as well as educational institutions. I worked with a couple of universities earlier this year, previously, to get leadership teams up to speed, and then obviously keynote speaking opportunities where they present themselves. So ultimately, here it is in a nutshell. It's about principled leadership first, which involves based in integrity and clarity or vision that you're communicating to your team. It's based so your base to be a principled leader is your brand, that you be resilient and be able to come back during challenging times. You be understanding and leverage your relationships with people, which involves a lot of emotional intelligence and being able to utilize that to be successful. And then communication with your team. So you can think about that brand, resilience, understanding, and communication as being the four legs to your chair, for example. So if you're able to do those four things, you can be a principled leader, which sets a stage for you to become a transformational leader, which is what we really focus on. And that's E to the third power. And this is how you perform. You've got your base, and how you perform involves execution, engagement, and empowerment. Execution, you have to show excellence in your ability to achieve objectives and be precise, act at the right time, not too early, but not too late, do the right things, pivot when you need to, and be astute about that. Engagement is about capturing their hearts and minds, which is critically important to be a transformational leader. They have to believe. John Maxwell, we talked about him a moment ago, said something that was prolific in one of his presentations. They don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And that's critically important, particularly in today's culture in social media and everything, which I think is, and I don't want to get on my soapbox, but there's a lot of negativity and, back and forth and everything. People need that positive, and the research is clear on this, to really be sufficiently motivated. And then finally, empowerment. Once you really have the message out there and people understand it, you'll be able to empower them with that message. And it's just as successful for you. As John would say, the power of one leader is significant, but if you have 10 followers, it's much more significant, and all the people that they influence. So it's really about what I like to call the democratization of leadership is our approach, where everyone has an opportunity to advance, not just somebody who might have had a leg up coming into the system or whatever else. We give you all the tools you need to succeed, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. First of all, I really love the comment about democratization of leadership. I think we need it right now. And it's not only where we are in the United States, but I think across the world with AI coming in, it's so many jobs are now at risk. So I think having that leadership transformational component in your overall background is a must now to retain your position within the industry. So I really, really love this idea. Go ahead.
I want to talk about that real quick. And
Mhm.
that's exactly my point. A lot of people talk about, perceive, I should say more accurately, that AI is going to be able to make all these huge decisions and we won't need people as much. I would actually advocate the opposite. In a world in which AI becomes more prolific, which it will, and it has the propensity to be a great tool properly utilized, AI is only as good as the people who are leveraging it, and that means the leaders. So I
Hmm.
think all of us have been waiting for this new thing to come in and be this, a magic wand that we can just wave and solve all of our problems. And it will create some efficiencies, but the leaders, the information, the execution of AI is only as good as the information we load into it and the guidance that we give it. And so if the leadership is not properly leading it, it's not going to do them any value. And that's where I think it makes leadership more important in today's world to be able to harness AI and then leverage it for your organization and you individually to maximize your success in your execution, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. Well said. And it's funny that you just talk about it. I just did a presentation or a post in which that's exactly what we are talking about, is the creativity, is the innovation, is the leadership that is really going to be defining those who are going to be successful, because it's all about the human component when it comes to this. I do want to mention that, as you mentioned at first, is the expertise. The first either is driving a lot of it, so you still need to understand it, but it's also ability to connect the different pieces and understanding how everything interrelates, so you can then better deploy and change AI, because AI is only as good as you mentioned, into what the coder is putting in, right? Those who are coding and doing behind the scenes is what's going to be driving. So having leaders who understand what's going on inside and be able to deploy it in the right way is very important. So definitely, I can have a separate altogether podcast about that, because that's a very important component of today's discussion. But as we are thinking about leadership and your ease to the third power, let's talk a little bit about your book. So many leaders are always trying to find a book that can relate to them, that they can read as they are traveling on a plane or on a bus or wherever they are going. So can you talk to us a little bit on about your upcoming book and what it's in there, what individuals can find it, and who is this book for?
Excellent question. I started writing at the beginning of last year, right after the holidays, and got most of it done by the end of summer. And I've been working for publishing, but I went back and did some re-edits a couple of months ago, which are now done. It's going to publish the beginning part of 2026 because I really the Bruce Blueprint has been the kind of the rebrand of it, because I think it's important that because the system runs linearly, it's really designed to be literally like a blueprint where you're building something. And ultimately, I like to think of it as what I like to call it is your building your leadership superpowers. Because I think that properly harnessed leadership is like
Mhm.
having a
Yeah.
been around someone who's a really incredible leader. I worked with a number of executives who were that way, but I've also met a lot of people in the entertainment business and are successful at what they do. There's really a different component in their DNA, which has the ability to create a message people will get on board with, a comfortability of sorts. And that
Mhm.
entertainment, the entertainment element to it, where they're engaged by you and they believe in you. And that's where integrity comes in. That I think is a key component. So much of our current culture has evolved into transactional. You do this and I give you that. And I think that while there's obviously value to that, even compensation systems are typically based upon that, right? There has to be something more than that, is what the research would say, and you know this.
Mhm.
So ultimately, that's what I'm talking about when I talk about capturing their hearts and minds. To truly get them to perform, it's got to be transformational and be something that really enables them to transition others. You hear so much talk, John Maxwell does, is servant leadership, which I
Mhm.
think is a great
Yeah.
concept. And I would argue, I would advocate the perspective that I'm a servant leader. But you can't start with being a servant leader first day. You have to build that
Mhm.
over a period of years, if not decades, to really,
Mhm.
truly reach your maximum potential and be able to achieve that objective. Oprah Winfrey once said, "You are not your circumstances, you are your possibilities." And
Mhm.
that's what leadership is all about. Not being harnessed by whatever's weighting you down right now, but looking and focusing on the future and allowing yourself to achieve your maximum objectives, which also means bringing others with you. A truly successful leader only succeeds when others are influenced to come along on the journey and also given the tools they need to succeed. And that needs to come from the leadership component, where the coaching and the training aspect and the things we try and give people is a key component to that. And the great thing about it is it's portable. You can take it wherever you go. whether it's, if you like to plan a sports team or with your family or within the organization you represent, all of that is influenced by your leadership skills. And wherever you go, you can help make it a magical place, and thus the reference to superpowers.
I 100% agree with you. And I think very often individuals think that leadership can be only at the executive level or the corporate arena, where in reality, leadership shows up in our communities, the way we are building them, right? The way we participate in our engagement or participate in our families, and so forth. So I think it's also redefining what leadership is, because it's not only being an executive with a team, is really anyone can be leader in their own right and impact whatever component of the society environment they are working in, living in, or volunteering in. And I think that's a very important part. The other piece that I want to comment on, which is what I always talk about as well, is bringing others along. I think it's very difficult to build boardrooms or build communities where some voices are not included. So I think if you bring them in, not only that you benefit from it because you have leaders who are extremely capable, but the perspective is so much broader when you are doing so. So my comment always for women leaders especially is bring the chair with you. You are going to that boardroom, bring the chair with you, even if it's just a folded chair for someone to sit at, or even if you bring them in to stand. It seems very proverbial, but it makes a difference. And then we also are presenting how leaders should behave, which I think most leaders forget. They are the example. So can you talk a little bit about that impact of modeling or influencing or really focusing on creating that network around you and training others to be the leaders for the future? What does it really make, and why is it so important for those who might be listening thinking, well, I never thought about it?
Great question. I will definitely get into that momentarily. I want to comment briefly on something I think
Mhm.
you just do. I think one of the things that really motivated me to also, put the book together and publish it and be passionate about it is I think this is a watershed moment for diversity. That
Mhm.
I think, particularly in the American culture, we had made such enormous progress, in my estimation, over generations to try and get more diverse and bring in people to the table. And I think that consequently, we were able to build, from an execution perspective, a financial, component that was obviously more successful than any other country in the world, and build a culture also that brought along everybody. Now, we don't have to agree on everything. And
Mhm.
should that diversity be legislated or not? There's a healthy debate about that.
Yeah.
But the fact is, we were accepting of everyone's opinions. And for some reason, that's become debatable recently. And
Mhm.
that's okay. I respect your opinion if that, I know where I stand.
Mhm.
I helped lead the diversity initiative when I was at Regal, which won an award from Fortune. It's one of the top 100 companies from a diversity perspective in the world. And, ultimately, this has been a cause that I've always been passionate about. I like to say my mom raised me right.
Mhm.
She
Yeah.
inculcated the values and the importance of diversity from the time I was at a young age. And I think that's also something that you can't ignore a certain percentage of the opinions when you make tactical decisions and expect it not to impact the success that you have. And for those people to not perform as well for you because they don't feel
Agreed.
sufficiently accepted or appreciated. So
Mhm.
that's also, I think, a trend that we need to look at. And again, everybody's gonna have a different perspective, and I respect the other side's opinion on that
Mhm.
to an extent. But ultimately, we can't forget what got us here and made this such an incredible country, a melting pot, was that acceptance of diversity and everything else over a period of time. There were times in which we weren't great at it, but I think that that's a critical component. And if you notice, as we've made this has become more controversial to even have an opinion on it, which is crazy in a democracy.
That's true.
It's also alienated us from a lot of our international relationships where they thought we were headed in a direction that internationally has become
Yeah.
accepted. And suddenly that's changed to an extent. So we need to work our way through that. And I think we will as a culture. I do. But at the same time, the fact that it's become debatable is regrettable. But we'll get through that. Now, to answer the question you just articulated, right? It's the program is built to be all inclusive. So the way we try and react is starting on day one. What does the leader perceive they need? We
Mm.
want to make sure, right? Leadership is not a me thing. Leadership's not a me thing. It's a we thing. So ultimately, it's important to start with a baseline, a gap analysis of sorts. Where do you think you'd like to get better, and how can we help you get there? And then we design a program around that. The elements of the Bruce blueprint are all in there, but they're going to be designed specifically to help you execute more successfully, or in an organization. What are the different components that you need to succeed? Because just having that conversation validates their opinion and makes them feel accepted from the very beginning,
Mhm.
which is critically important. So
Yeah.
that's really, it's really, the longer you're around as a trainer or a coach, you realize you need to flip the script. It's not about you, it's about them. So we got to find out what do they need and then build a system around that. And then if there's areas they need to improve that they're not aware of, certainly we need to make them cognizant of that and be able to illustrate that with specific examples, which helps them better be able to appreciate your perspective. So I think that's so critically important. And you raised a point a couple of minutes ago, which I think is critically important. So many people perceive a title in hierarchy as suddenly meaning they're a leader. That doesn't
Mm.
mean you're a leader at all. It means you have a title. And that's great.
Right.
Congratulations on achieving that in your career path. That success should certainly be celebrated. But until you appreciate the team, because it takes
Mm.
teamwork to make the dream work, you're not going to achieve your objectives. And that's truly who you are, is what are you able to achieve collectively as a group in your shared objectives. And so it's really about looking at things differently. When I did the research that I've done, I do it every day. So when I did, I don't
Mhm.
mean that I've done my leadership research, but
Yeah.
when you research leadership, John Wooden, the UCLA basketball coach, I'm a big sports fan, who won 10 NCAA basketball championships, 7 consecutive, such a great leader. He talked about reaching your full potential and performing to your ultimate capabilities. So he would look at a win sometimes in basketball as though they lost because they didn't perform as well as they should have. And he would look at a loss as a win sometimes because they performed to their ultimate potential. They just didn't quite get it done. And that's really what life is all about. Sports you can use as an example because it's got a scoreboard and you can easily identify a win or a loss. But it's really more important than that. Did you perform to your ultimate capabilities? And do you get better every single day to lead toward a better day? Those are the types of things, John would want, who wrote so many great quotes, hurry but don't rush, stuff like that. A failure to plan is a plan for failure.
Yeah.
His success as a leader and as a coach, which is what he was, obviously, so I take a lot of inspiration from him, is taking very complex thoughts and making them very simple in quips in a single sentence,
Mm.
which you can remember and then be able to better your performance in the moment you need it most. And it's those type of leaders who I'm most influenced by,
Mhm.
and that's what I try and be, and everybody's working on that every single day to get a little bit better.
That's a really, really good point. I want to go back to one of the comments that you made about coaches really being a mirror very often. As an executive, I also have a coach, and I am very proud of that because we all need that, right? We all need a mirror. And very often, being an executive or being a leader tends to be sometimes a little bit lonely. So you have to have someone that you can trust and that you can work through. And over time, as you take on different roles and as environment changes, as you get to lead different types of teams or different types of personalities, you do need to make sure that you are meeting, like you were saying, meeting the objectives of the team. You are the servant for them to make them the best they can be. So can we talk maybe a little bit about some of the why in your mind it is important for executives at even those high up levels, having those coaching practices, having a coach on a almost on a pretty much daily basis or some whatever weekly, monthly, whatever the frequency is, in order to be as most productive and as the best leader they can be for their teams.
Yes, absolutely. You just pointed it out. Leadership, when you get in a position of hierarchy, and it gets more significant the higher up you go, is a very lonely thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because ultimately, the more authority or influence you have, everybody around you doesn't necessarily come to you with the opinion they truly have. They want to try and stay in your good graces. So
Yeah.
I'm not implying they're lying because I don't know that they are, but I do think that they're thinking tactically about their career path and how they want to succeed, and they're going to be hesitant to give you the information you really need.
Mm-hmm.
And so my experience is, I went to a conference in Miami in early September, which was women leadership oriented, and talked to some of the leaders there. And I just got the Gratitude Summit this weekend with global women speakers, which I love doing and working with them. And all the people at the highest levels have these coaches. And the
Mm-hmm.
common denominator when I worked with executives, when I was at Regal, we had 16 senior executives or officers of the company in totality. All of them worked with us as far as from a coaching perspective, but had people they looked upon. Sometimes it was spiritually related, which is great that was an element of what they have there, and every person needs to decide what component that plays in their life, or if it does, and all that's fine, right? That's part of feeling confident and feeling self-actualized.
Mm-hmm.
But that coaching is the common denominator between people who succeed and people who flail. That you have to have that coaching around you. If you've got a significant other in a relationship, sometimes it's your significant other. They'll tell you, that doesn't sound like a good idea or whatever. And suddenly you'll pause for a moment. I need to think that through then.
Mm-hmm.
That all of that's part of the coaching process. But having someone who's skilled and qualified to be a coach is a huge leg up. And sometimes it's a distinction between an organization succeeding or failing. When you look at the common denominator between companies which typically fail, I just talked about it, recently on my website. I've got some research there that I identify 70% of leaders believe their failures in business are due to poor leadership. And that's a component, and it makes sense, right? That's one of these things that is true. You don't have to have research for everything. I don't have any research that says Monday's called Monday, but it's true, right? Sometimes common sense needs to still mean something in this world. And those, my experience is the higher up they go, and this is also true of a lot of stars. If you go see a Hollywood star, I've had a chance to meet a ton of people, The Rock, Tom Cruise, name anybody in Hollywood, Will Ferrell. There's a good chance that I've met him at some point or another through the various functions. They've always got people around him who are part of that team. But the best ones have people on that team who are going to tell them what they need to hear for them to be able to improve their performance. And that's where they have an entourage of sorts. If you watch the one of the shows on TV.
Yeah.
That that's the sort of thing you need around you to be able to think it through, because nobody can do this by themselves. And the higher up you have an authority, the more lonely it's going to get. So you need to have a place, and maybe it's outside your organization. It probably is, where you can go in for a checkup occasionally. We have doctors for health. Coaches or trainers are really doctors for life, and they can help you succeed properly utilized. So you should think about that and leverage that to enable you to be as successful as your potential allows.
Wow, I really love that. It's extremely powerful. And again, for those new leaders or upcoming leaders or leaders who are struggling, I know there might be some people right now struggling, figuring out who they are and having a little bit of a doubt or imposter syndrome of where they are headed. I do think that having a leader, like you were saying, a skilled leader who understands it, because I think that's very important. Not everyone is going to be the right leader, the right coach for you. So it has to be the right fit. But having someone that you can talk to is extremely important. So as we are moving through that discussion, let's talk a little bit about where do you thinking in the next 10 to 15 years leadership is gonna go. We talked a little bit about AI, but how do you think it's going to change? What should we as leaders think about it? Or for those who are entering industries and workforce, what they should be thinking about?
I think AI is a critical component that executives don't at least understand it enough, need to go get some support so they can. If you go into, for example, I'll just use Chat GPT because it's the most prolific, out there. People can get on it. It has settings in it. If you look at the settings, you can actually decide what its attitude is. You can program it to be agreeable, but then it's probably not giving you the feedback you need. You can even program it to be a little disagreeable, which you may actually want to be able to question anything that you're going to do, right? So you have the ability to program all those things in. So I think AI will enable us, to answer the question you articulated, will enable us to be more efficient in what we do. But it's only a tool, and that's all it is. It's going to be important that we leverage that tool in the proper way so we can be successful. I think also the ability for us to leverage metrics, because we have all this data available, and the internet just keeps growing so rapidly, and we have all these tools available, often AI directed now in today's culture. All of those metrics will enable us to be more successful. But at the end of the day, the people who are going to have the highest levels of authority and also make the most important decisions for the betterment of an organizations as well as themselves are going to be the best leaders. And that's always going to be true because they have the ability to build consensus and to execute for the betterment of their team. So that's always going to be a component, and we cannot forget that. That as the country's gotten more and more technologically dependent in the United States, and the world becomes more technologically dependent, there's this massive proliferation of technology all the time. It's still those same people who have the ability to lead others who will be successful. I tell people during the coaching sessions that I have, you cannot move mountains, but you can move people. And if you're really successful at moving people, that will enable you to move mountains. And the American experience has been indicative of that. Often, does injustice exist sometimes? Absolutely. But if you have the ability to motivate people, have them coalesce around shared objectives and motivate them to execute to the maximum of their ability to help achieve those objectives, then you'll be perpetually successful wherever you go. So leadership 10 to 15 years from now will still be led by those same individuals, but they'll probably be astute enough to leverage this AI function, this technological function, to be successful where they need that kind of support. Because people don't naturally, you can't just say something and assume people agree with it. You have to be able to illustrate that for them and substantiate it in their minds. And that's where AI becomes enormously successful because you can go find information, which you'll need to check. It won't always be accurate. And so you want to make sure that you still have fact checking as part of that process. But AI is an enormous tool properly leveraged. It is not a replacement for strategic thinking. And that's very important. When you look at sports all the time, they talk about the analytics. And sure, the analytics are important, but they don't have the same team that you do. So you might want to consider the parts and the pieces that you have before you start assuming the analytics drive every decision. Sometimes you'll have to go against the consensus to be successful. You look for any great leader, there's times in which they went against the consistent. Steve Jobs at Apple went against the consensus for a number of years that he was there early on. And it wasn't until he came back later on that he became this guru we all look to even today after he has passed, that you have to have the wherewithal to go against the tide sometimes when going against the tide is the right thing to do, if that makes sense.
Oh, absolutely. To be honest, I couldn't said it better than you just did. I do think that it's all about leadership. It's all about moving people. We cannot move the mountains, but we can move the people and we can make a change. And as we are wrapping up this, I think this is an important lesson to learn. And for those of you who might be thinking about or stressing about AI, please know, as Bruce said, this is a tool. We need to learn it. It's our responsibility to do that. We need to understand it. We need to understand where the faults are. We need to understand where to find and how to calibrate it so to make sure that it's the most representative of what's really going on. But it's our responsibility then to ultimately lead and implement it. And I also loved your comment. Great leaders will not always go with the consensus because I think being a leader is also being brave enough, courageous enough to break from the mold and do something that is big. And I was watching yesterday a movie about the hot flaming Cheetos and how the CEO of PepsiCo at the time talked to the plant worker and ultimately broke with the leaders that he had because he trusted what this individual thought about, and ultimately that became $1 billion brand. And I think we as leaders need to think about it, question this. And again, I think this is where coaches can help you become that. Know when you break it, follow your intuition, know when to apply it, and then stick to it and see the benefits. Bruce, this has been a wonderful discussion. I truly appreciate it. I love all of the insights that you have shared, and I know that there will be probably many questions that others will be asking, the audience will be asking. So Bruce, how can individuals who are very much inspired by this discussion can contact you so you can help them, or they can have at least discussion with you of what they should be thinking about as they move in their leadership journey?
Absolutely. Thanks, Dr. E. Obviously, I'm on LinkedIn, as everyone says, and
Mhm.
you can direct message me there. And that's, I love interacting every single day. I'm on LinkedIn to check where things are at and have a chance to communicate. I do have a website. It's brucewren.com. Real simple to go ahead and contact me there. And obviously, we offer free consultations up front. I love, really connecting with people and having those sorts of conversations that we're having today. And that's to me, that's the spice of life
Mhm.
and what motivates me. And I love going to conferences. And I can't wait for you guys in the spring. We've got something coming up here to talk about and travel and go a chance to interact with all these people. Life is all about these impressions that we leave. I have a concept of fingerprints. Everybody you meet with, you leave an impression on. And so you need to think about what that impression is because it will leave a lasting impression, which you'll never be able to change. And that first interaction is critically important. that's where a leader, when I talk about building brand, that starts from the time they start interviewing, right? I mean, that's part of their brand. It's from the time they meet you to wherever you go. And the same's true in life with relationships, right? If you have a bad first date, you're probably not going to have a second one. So, ultimately, that's what I'm talking about. But that's the best way to reach me, LinkedIn and also on my website. But I look forward to talking with anyone, even if it's just having a discussion, about their leadership journey and where they've been and where they want to go. I think that's so important. Abraham Lincoln once said, "Whatever you are, be a good one."
Hmm.
And leadership, that's critically important. And we need to be thinking about that every day and with everything that we do. Because if you want to leave and get impression on someone, it's the ones who think about that ahead of time and leave that good impression who have the highest likelihood of succeeding.
Well, wonderful. What a great parting words. For those of you who've been listening, it's been a pleasure. My name is Dr. Eva Kleczek, and I'm the host of the Voices of Impact with Dr. E. Thank you so much for Kirti and I. Thank you so much, Bruce, for joining. And for those of you listening, we will
Thank you.
see you next time. Thank you.
Earthy, good to see you. I'll talk to you soon. Thank you for having me.